Welcome to Building Fortunes Radio. Make sure you check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Leads customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingils.
Okay, and we are here. My name is Peter Mingils, and I am doing something new today on Building Fortunes Radio. And Scott, I guess I need a sound check from you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, Peter.
And do you hear you too when I'm doing this? I usually don't do it this way.
No, it sounds just pretty much like normal.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to give it a whirl. For those people that are unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingils, and we run this radio show on Building Fortunes Radio every Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And I do this with Scott Johnson, who he and I have been talking about some of the major issues that are happening in the MLM world. And I got this started because I was really interested in helping people become successful building home-based businesses and avoiding the inevitable scams, potholes, things that most people have a challenge with. So what I did was we started to do Building Fortunes Radio so we can highlight some of the people that are doing it the right way. And we have lots of radio shows during the week with people like Dr. Jerry Brown, people like, we had Jody Baer, who's doing it with, she was doing it with Vemma the right way, and now she's doing it with Zija the right way. We have Dr. Awaton. We've had a new gentleman who's going to be a host of ours. His name is LB Hassan, and these are people that are doing it the right way. They're working hard. They're selling products. They're building teams, everything that I would consider to be an honorable profession. And then yet there are still a lot of people, some of them are our customers, that get tied into these basically product-based pyramid scams, money games, gifting programs, whatever it might be. And I try to educate people to help them avoid those types of issues. So what I want to do right now is I just want to give Scott a chance to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself, the website he has, which is, by the way, stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com. And then we'll get into some of the topics that are happening this week. And Scott, I'm going to be a little bit awkward on this one only because I'm doing this. Usually I have a telephone headset on when I'm usually working, but in this instance, they had a problem with their phone lines. I'm a little bit out of sorts using a regular microphone, but we use microphones all the time, I suppose. So I'm going to switch to a headset so this way you don't echo in my ear as we go. But tell people a little bit more about you, your background, your website, and then we'll jump into this week.
Okay, Peter. As Peter said, I was in Amway, and I was actually in Amway for a number of years, from 1993 until 2009, although from 2005 until 2009, I was kind of a undercover distributor, if you will, trying to figure out a way of building an Amway business honestly rather than dishonestly. And the dishonestly part really is two parts. One is there's almost no retail sales to external customers, which makes Amway an illegal pyramid. And also the upline, the top 1% or so, they make more of their money from the tools that they sell than they do from Amway, but they pretend that it all comes from Amway. And when I mention tools, I'm talking about things like various meetings, books, CDs, in the old days, cassette tapes, voicemail, website access, etc. Anything that you pay your upline under the pretense of being trained or getting information, and I'm not saying you don't get trained or you don't get information, but they make massive profits from that, and they just pretend that it all comes from Amway or name your MLM, because it's not unique to Amway. A lot of other MLMs have similar practices. In fact, there's one that's in the news, it's been in the news for some time, Herbalife, and they have supposedly gotten rid of all of their tool profit. However, I've done some research more recently and found that they still charge about the same amount of money for meetings as they did before the controversy started. So I think they've gotten rid of some of the things like lead generation, but I don't believe they've gotten rid of everything, as Herbalife has instructed them to do. There was a letter that came out, I believe it was the summer of 2013, maybe 14, where Herbalife said no more profit on any tools. And I talked actually last week to a fella who is involved with the state senator, Senator Klein, I believe is his name, in New York. And Senator Klein did some similar undercover investigation like Bill Ackman did back in 2012 and found the same practices were going on. And in fact, I listened in, I should say, to a community meeting, it was the week before last, where Senator Klein sat down with a bunch of his constituents and other representatives of the community, and basically they told their story about how much money they lost. And I was able to sit in on that because I became aware of this meeting through Roger Van Blissingen and asked if he could set me up a conference call, and he did. Thank you, Roger. And then I talked to the gentleman who put the conference call together after the meeting, and there was a lot of problems with the sound quality and everything. It seemed to be a voice-activated microphone, so it just was kind of choppy, and the microphone was not professionally placed, so sometimes the voices were loud, sometimes they were quiet. But I had a very nice discussion with this guy who set up this conference call, and it turns out he was the same exact individual who conducted the research for Senator Klein. And so we had a very nice talk later that day about the fact that people losing their money is really just a symptom. What you have to do is analyze what's going on and figure out what is the root cause. And that's what I believe I've found out. And so, Peter, did you want me to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm glad you were able to actually listen into that community meeting. That was the one that Roger had announced, I think it was on December 9th. And that was the one that he did in the Bronx.
Yes, I believe it was the 9th.
And and he helped facilitate that. So I'm glad that you were able to actually witness it as well. So keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation was good, but as I just mentioned, I viewed the meeting as more of just a discussion of symptoms, and so I was able to talk to this gentleman who actually did the research. So it was very interesting to talk to him about what he saw and what he actually witnessed and recorded, versus just talking to somebody about theory, because he was actually there personally conducting the research, the undercover research, if you will. And so it was very enlightening because we talked a little bit about the fact that these nutrition clubs charge people to come to a meeting, to get them all fired up about Herbalife, and yet Herbalife came out with that letter, I believe it was the summer of 2013, saying not only can you not do lead generation, you cannot make 1 penny of profit from any kind of tools at all. In fact, I believe that letter specifically mentioned meetings being included in that. And so you can imagine a nutrition club, when they hold a meeting, they're already paying for the utilities and they're already paying for the rent and everything else that goes into the nutrition club. So to charge money for a meeting is obviously having a meeting for profit. And so being able to talk to this guy who was actually there, who knew they were charging money for the meetings, was just a really good thing, because we didn't have to worry about, I wonder if they still charge money for meetings, because he knows that they do to this day. And that's something that Herbalife supposedly got rid of back in the summer of 2013. So these kinds of things just go along. You really can't believe what you see or what somebody says. You have to know what's actually happening on the ground. And fortunately, our court system has a similar opinion. They really don't care what anyone claims or states. They want to know what the facts are, and all the theory and all the opinions and everything else really doesn't matter. It really comes down to, okay, what's the real facts? And that's one good thing about, I think, our judicial system in general. I do have my own complaints, but in general, they do look for the facts, and they make decisions based on the facts. So that's something back in 2005, I found out all this money was being made on tools, and I just, went cold turkey basically and got essentially abandoned my upline. Not that I really wanted to talk to them after cheating me out of so much money for so many years, but that just gives you a taste of where their priorities are. If you don't buy the tools, you go from best buddy to unknown person literally overnight. So it was quite astonishing and a real good illustration of where the priorities are. And so, Peter, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, not at all. But do you know anything about the specifics of that meeting? I know it was in the Bronx. I know there's a lot of people of Latino, if you will, descent. Do you know how many people were there, or how many people did their testimonials, or how many people actually, what kind of a crowd it was? Was it a small, intimate crowd? Was there 100 people? Was it in a church? Was it in a building? Like, what? Give us more of the details so we can kind of envision this.
Yeah, I don't know the location. I assume it was in a community center. It sounded like it was in that kind of a facility. I didn't hear him mention anything about a church or anything of that nature, but it was in the Bronx. And I got the impression just by, the voices I overheard before and after the meeting started, and this is a pure guess, I'm guessing it was 20 to 30 people. Roger would know. He was there. So if we can get a hold of Roger, he'll know exactly how many people. But, yeah, it was mainly Hispanics from what I could tell. And it was the Senator Klein, and I believe there was a couple other community leaders, like a councilwoman and somebody else there that was representing the community. And probably, I would guess, about a dozen people spoke up and told their story about how much money they lost. And most of them were Hispanics, and they spoke in Spanish, so they would speak, and then it would be translated into English. And like I said earlier, the quality on the call was not real good, and it wasn't anyone's fault. It's just, setting up something like that in a rush and not, professionally placing microphones and that kind of thing. I don't know if I could have been just on a cell phone. And so, when you put that on speakerphone, it just picks up sounds from every direction, and it's not real high quality. But I was able to listen to enough of it.
Somebody could have put their coat on the phone. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it was one of those voice-activated deals where, you may not hear the very first part of the first syllable when someone speaks, but then it picks up. And then sometimes if they're not speaking loud enough, it kind of goes away. And so some people I could hear pretty clearly. Other people, probably because they were either talking more quietly and or they were further away from the microphone, it would just cut in, cut out pretty consistently. But I was able to pick up enough to know that these were all people that were complaining about losing money. And that's when I mentioned to the gentleman afterwards, I said, losing money really is not a crime. It's a symptom. And what you have to do is figure out, why did they lose money? Were they not doing something right? Were they not following directions? One woman said when she was losing money and she went to her upline, they just told her, well, you're not working hard enough. Well, you really can't measure what's working hard enough because you don't know what the person's skills are. You don't know who they're talking to. There's a lot of unknowns. And so to say you're not working hard enough really doesn't get you very far. What you really need to know is, what is the overall process? Overall, how much product is Herbalife selling to real customers, to non-distributors? And that's really the key. And in fact, that to me is the big news of this past week. I think we've talked a little bit about this video that was done in, I believe it was 2005, about 10 years ago, about Herbalife, and it's basically a speech by the Herbalife CEO, Michael Johnson, who came over from Disney World or Disney, I should say, in 2003. So he had been there about 2 years when he made this speech, which gave him plenty of time to know what was going on. And earlier this year, this summer, a reporter from the New York Post said that she saw the entire video. She didn't release any of it at all, but she did release some written snippets from that video, and they were pretty damning. But you really don't know the context. You don't know what was said directly before and directly after those statements, and you didn't really know if they were accurate. I mean, I actually trust her. I think, she is a reporter for a newspaper. She's well known. She has a career. I think in general, even if journalists have a bias, they try to put the facts out there. And so I had every reason to believe her. It's just that until you see the video for yourself, you don't know. And so these little snippets have been coming out over the past couple months, but every time someone puts one up on YouTube, Herbalife somehow says that's copyright violation or whatever they're saying, and it comes right down again. So if you're there really quick, you can see it once, but then you can't show it to anyone else because by the time you look at it a second time, it's gone. So now what is happening is these little snippets are showing up on non-YouTube sites, and they've been staying up. And the one that came up this past week is the one where Michael Johnson mentions within the first 10 seconds of the video, that little snippet of video, that most people join Herbalife to make money, which is diametrically opposite from what Herbalife has been saying more recently. They claim to have done a study and said 73% of the people that join Herbalife join it just for the discounts. Well, to me, that leaves you 27%? So if 27% is most, then I guess we can say most people, join to be real distributors. But we know that's backwards. It's exactly backwards from what he stated in 2005, and I don't believe there's any kind of a context, on either side of that little video snippet that would undo those words. It was a pretty plainly stated fact in 2005 that most people join Herbalife to make money, and now more recently, after Bill Ackman stirred things up and David Einhorn stirred things up, they said most people join just to get the discount. And so one of those has to be true. My research in all kinds of MLMs and in sort of narrowing it down and refining what's going on, if you've got overpriced products, you're just not going to sell much. And so in my mind, he was being more honest in 2005 than he was in 2013. And I'm still waiting for the one snippet to come out that this reporter reported on earlier in the summer, which said, we need to get rid of this lead generation. This is going to eat us up. And that little video hasn't come out yet. I'm still waiting for that one, because to me that's the really big one, because if Herbalife is anywhere close to Amway, that's where most of the money is being made at the upper levels. That's the source of these people showing off their lifestyles, their mansions and their luxury cars and their yachts and their planes and everything else in order to entice them to join. And so that is just such extreme fraud that, to me, that's just the biggest thing. So I'm looking forward to that one coming out. Hopefully it will. But people can see the video I just talked about, where Michael Johnson said most people join to make money. That's on my website in Section D. And again, my website is stoptheamwaytoolscam.wordpress.com. And if you go to Section D as in David, you'll see on December 17th, there's a link there where you can see him making that statement that I just mentioned within the first 10 seconds. So it's right up front, which is good, because he goes into some other things which, while interesting, they're not the thing that interests me the most.
Yeah, I have a certain sympathy for Michael Johnson, because if you're trying to run a sales crew, I've been a sales manager. I have hundreds of thousands of hours of calls that I've made with my salespeople, and if all of them were recorded and indexed and then eventually played and thrown into different contexts, I'd probably feel completely taken out of context in many of the situations, because sometimes you say things for effect, sometimes you say some things because you're emotional, sometimes you say things because you're trying to make a point. So I think if we take all of that stuff out, most people that have been around Herbalife, if you went to an opportunity meeting and you joined from an opportunity meeting, or a friend that wanted to introduce you to the business, you joined because you're interested in making money. If you joined because your friend, I'm going to use an exaggeration, your friend was overweight, he or she lost some weight, you're at her kitchen table, she's making you a shake, and she says, wow, these things taste really good, I'd like to have one of those, then you might have said, well, here's the price, and if you buy it as a distributor, you earn a discount. Then if you were introduced by the product, using the product because of the product, then you can make the safe claim they were joining because they wanted a discount. So if you take a look at the massive numbers that Herbalife must recruit on a regular basis, I can't see how a lot of them are actually done at kitchen tables and in living rooms and dens with people drinking the shakes. I could imagine that most of the times they were done by people bringing people to an opportunity meeting. So regardless of whatever results Michael Johnson's company got by paying for the survey, which is kind of somewhat hysterical that anybody would even say that would even be partially valid results. You know, we paid for a survey. This is what the company found. I'm like, okay, didn't the company want to get paid for doing the survey? What do you think they would find? They probably ask you, what do you want us to find? And we'll make sure we give you those results. Well, not taking that too much out of context, it's pretty clear that, you know, common sense would probably suggest, and we don't know all the facts and the details, that most people joined Herbalife to be able to make some extra money. If you ask most of those people that were at that meeting that you were a witness to, if you said, did you join us just because you wanted to open up a shop and give discounts to people, the answer is no. They wanted the lifestyle that they were alluded to in the video or from the guy with the microphone or the person who introduced that to them. So let's kind of call it the way it is. Most people join network marketing companies most of the time to make income. I mean, that's why they do it. That's why the videos are such. The videos aren't such. Well, like, you could make hourly wages that are competitive to McDonald's if you join Herbalife. They don't make videos like that. They make videos like what? Lifestyle of the rich and famous, pretty beaches, nice fancy cars, lifestyle that would be somewhat of the rich and famous. And that in itself is just so unreal for most people. That's where the deception lies. And Scott, I think that's where we have
And let's be clear, neither one of us have a problem with making money. That's not the problem. The problem is the money coming mainly from selling products to real customers, or by getting new distributors involved and them buying also, because if it's the latter, then it's illegal. If you've got lots of customers, it's no problem. And likewise, if that lifestyle that's being shown off is coming from the tools and you're being silent about that, then that's fraud. That's business fraud. And so it's really important that the listeners understand we're not against making money. We just want you to make money legally.
Right. I think it's the level of not necessarily displaying the whole entire truth, not telling the whole story, allowing innocent or gullible people to be able to lose a lot of their money and then kind of double down. It's the vulnerable people sometimes that don't understand how these work, or the desperate people, because desperate people sometimes do desperate things. And sometimes if this is their only alternative, they wind up losing their money. So, you know, we can't say, you know, no one's trying to save the world. No one's thinking that this is going to be completely eliminated, but there's got to be some level of balance and full disclosure. The interesting thing, Scott, that recently came out in this Herbalife thing that's so fascinating is, and I got to say this, I've watched a lot of Herbalife, you know, promotional videos, and I've spoken to a lot of Herbalife people, and I know there's a lot of Herbalife people that are doing things the right way. Their nutrition clubs are selling products. They have a cultural kind of an environment to it. The people that are running them, I mean, they're really good people. They work hard. They add real value. So when done correctly, I think a nutrition club could really be done correctly. It's when the predators come out, they make people buy the volume and they never have a chance, or they put together these training programs or all those types of things where there's losers in the equation that I really have an issue with. But in following the Herbalife scenario with what Roger has pointed out with the nutrition clubs, I've been kind of digging into the paperwork as well with the filings, and so much money has been spent from Herbalife on defending themselves legally, you know, in legal expenses. I think it was something like $7.3 or $7.6 million just quarter. So when I come back, I think I'm going to be an attorney helping to represent companies like Herbalife, because that's a lot of bananas.
it's a lot of money, and I think I saw something from Ackman recently where he claims, and this isn't just legal, but this is all the lobbying and all the other related activities that Herbalife has been doing ever since he came out with his report back in December of 2012. I believe the number I saw was $101 million total that Herbalife has spent, defending themselves from all different angles, not just legally, but all the other things, hiring, for example, they've hired, I believe, 3 or 4 really high-powered former political people, just so they can maximize their influence in Washington, D.C., and those people don't come free, and so they're paying them probably hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, plus probably some pretty nice stock options. So, that I think is part of what Bill Ackman has been trying to get his arms around by reading all of their financial statements, which he is apparently pretty good at doing along with his analysts. So, yeah, for $101 million, if that's anywhere close to what Herbalife has spent, just imagine how little money they would have spent by just doing the most straightforward thing, which is going out and taking a random, mathematically significant number of distributors and saying, hey, our rules say, and they do say this, you must keep records of your retail sales for 2 years. So you go out in the field, you say, give up your records because we're going to prove this Ackman character is lying through his teeth, and we're going to prove him wrong. They could have done that probably within a month of December of 2012, and they haven't done that. Now, I believe they probably did do that, and they found people don't keep records, or the records that they did keep, they couldn't find hardly any retail sales. So they said, well, we don't want to go there. Let's do a survey instead. Now, I don't have any proof that's what happened, but just think how much more straightforward it would have been just to do a statistically significant number of samples of the distributors and collected that information and said, Ackman, you're all wet. And it just would have gone away. But instead, they did a survey. They refused to release the parameters of that survey, how it was done, et cetera. And so that just raises the suspicion even more.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see that Herbalife was inventory loading people. There was a big incentive to join at the top level. The compensation plan sometimes affects behavior. And there was a big push for a lot of people to push in that general direction. And they took the money from whoever would give them the money, and they did videos, including the ones for the lead generation, that suggested that, you know what, I would, they'll say things like, I was down and out. I put the last $4,000 on my credit card. I had to do everything I possibly could just to get this going. I'm sorry, I didn't shut off my my phones. So this one's going to keep ringing. I'm going to hang up on this gentleman and then have to disconnect. So sorry about that. So the scenario is that they really probably they can't defend their situation. They have way too many people that were just purchasing products for the portion of purchasing products, and not necessarily selling them very much to the end result, retail, the end customer. So they have they would just have a problem proving that they have as many customers that they have, and they're coming up with whatever kind of descriptions or whatever kind of definitions they possibly can to be able to try to defend this thing. And unfortunately, because it is so big, it's a publicly traded company, it's very complex. They have close to, I think it's like 8,000 employees in 91 different countries, 5,300 different products. I mean, this is a very big, very large company. It's publicly traded. Some of the biggest peoples and the biggest egos that are on the stock market today are wrapped up and involved in this. So this is going to be a really messy situation. And all of the federal government, or most of the federal government places, the Department of Justice, the FBI, I'm sure there's other things involved in this as well. They have currency issues in different foreign countries and things like that. So there's so many things that make this a fascinating case with a lot of drama. And who knows when it's ever going to shake out, but now it has to. So Bill Ackman has done a wonderful job of forcing this thing to eventually, someone's got to address these issues. It can't just go away. Now, I think if I were in Bill Ackman's head, I probably would have said, especially since he's having such a bad year this year, he probably, in retrospect, didn't need the drama associated with the 3 years worth of all this sort of stuff. And who knows if he's going to come out on top or not. And he probably learned a lot more about Herbalife as well. So I don't know if he really wants the company to go out of business. I know that might be what he says right now. But he did do a service for the network marketing industry as far as shining a very big flashlight on this subject. And that has been really making a lot of people take a look at what's been going on. And I'm sure it has some level of influence on what happened with Vemma. It's probably going to have some level of influence of what's happening in the industry. So Bill Ackman was a contributing factor, or is a contributing factor, on influencing the course by which network marketing is going. Some of it good, some of it hard, some of it bad. Some people don't pay attention, but some people are actually paying attention. But he has had a very big impact on what's been going on, certainly shown a light on certain areas, and will make a difference in 2015 and into 2016. Do you have any predictions, Scott? Go ahead.
Yeah, he has. I'm just going to say Ackman has said that he's not sure if he would ever short a stock, particularly as publicly as he shorted Herbalife, because it is so much of a hassle. You know, it's so much trouble to, be the bad guy and have to sort of defend yourself when you're trying to just bring attention to a company that you honestly believe is doing things the wrong way. And he said from the very beginning, too, I remember just way back in December of 2012, that he really can't do this by himself. He needs the federal government to take action. He does not have the power. He's not the judge, jury, prosecutor, and everything else, that he needs their help. And that's what his goal was to provide the government enough information to take action, as the government did with Vemma. Vemma was another company, not publicly traded, but pretty good size, not as big as Herbalife, for sure. They were about $200 million a year, and Herbalife is somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 billion a year. So, quite a bit larger, but still $200 million a year is a pretty good chunk of change. So the government has demonstrated, when they have whatever caused them to move on Vemma, and we don't really know why they picked Vemma. My theory is it was pretty obvious, and secondarily, they probably caused quite a political ruckus just because they were targeting college students, and the parents of college students were finding that little Johnny or little Sally was spending all of their money not on books and tuition, but on Vemma. And so they got pretty upset, and a few of them probably were, fairly wealthy people and have influence and talked to the right people in government and pulled the right strings, and voila, the FTC came marching into Vemma's headquarters back in August. In fact, I just saw a story today that Vemma had had about a $2 million a month volume. And, that might seem like a lot of money, and it is, $2 million. But when you figure they were doing $200 million a year, that's approximately 1/10 of their volume. And some of the stories, and I'm not sure exactly where all this information came from, but I found it on the businessforhome.org website, and one of the things that really floored me was that, let me see if I can find it here, make sure I get this correct, that people were making, they paid out less than $30,000 in bonuses last month, paid out only $30,000 in commissions since August 24th, 2015. So this includes that, month and a half that they were shut down until October 8th, up until, I don't know how recently, I assume somewhere near the beginning of December to be able to report these numbers. But that's not much money, even if you count a month and a half of October and November. And how long are people going to stay if the total commission was $30,000? In fact, another place here that talked about, it says, Vemma is engaged in significant litigation with the FTC coupled with the attendant negative publicity. Most importantly, even though the vast majority of Vemma's affiliates understand they will be unlikely to earn commissions under the company's new compensation plan, they continue to order product. And that's right in this report that came out of businessforhome.org. I haven't looked at it close enough to know what the source of this statement is. It looks like it's BK, but I would question how much longer are people actually going to buy product if they're only making $30,000 total since August 24th, and most of them don't even think they can make any commissions from Vemma. I just don't think that's going to hold up over, let's say, one more month.
Yeah, watching Vemma's demise right now is becoming somewhat painful, and I can't help but feel sorry in a certain aspect for the situation, because they are whacking BK every way they possibly can whack them. So here's some of the challenges that happen is once you get labeled by having FTC action against you, nobody wants to touch you. So all of his credit card merchants are just, they all dropped them, will never take them. Nobody wants to even be close to this guy because he's been branded by the FTC. So whether he's right or wrong, proven guilty or not, he's guilty in the eyes of all the merchant processors. So he's also been whacked by the predatory nature of the merchants as well. So imagine you go out and you have your merchant account all of a sudden, and they're happily taking your money, meaning collecting, letting the credit cards go through. But when they have to give it to you, they say, "Oops, now that you're at risk, we think we're going to hold it." And I was reading, I think, in the same documentation that you were doing, that one of his merchant accounts held like $90,000 from him. So they basically took $90,000 in business, and then they hold it in reserve for 6 or 9 months. Right now, it's 180 days that your credit card company has the opportunity to charge back. So they're going to hold it for that full length of time. Now think about this. The poor guy, and I'm mentioning the poor guy or the company, now has to still ship the product because the customer paid. He can't get paid on the product, and what is he supposed to do, pay commissions? So it's kind of like he's got to send out free product, pay the commissions all on top of that, deal with all these types of things, and then have no cash flow coming in. So it's almost as if, if you've ever watched like a cat play around with a mouse, or a killer whale play around with a wounded seal, or penguin out there in the ocean, he's just getting battered around, and it's kind of sad to watch, because he's really given no chance now. He's got so many things thrown up against the poor guy. Now I say the poor guy because you try to make, I guess the FTC is making a statement, or whatever's trying to make a statement, but right now they're not even giving the guy a fighting chance. Even if you were a healthy company, you'd have challenges going through the things that he's going through right now. So, and in addition to that, I think, Scott, he tried to sell some assets to a company that he had, and they aren't even letting him sell his assets to use for a cash inflow, because they feel that if this eventually goes the FTC's way and they are deemed illegal, that those assets that he infused to the company to keep it going would have been assets that could have been given back to the victims of this scheme. So they're not even giving him any opportunity to be able to try to turn this thing, save it, or whatever. So it's kind of like we're just watching the cat play around with the wounded mouse, and it's kind of sad. After a while, it just gets kind of sad to watch. And when you talk about that $30,000 commissions total, when you do a commission run for $30,000 for your whole entire sales force, where maybe one top distributor's check was $30,000 for the month, you realize that they got to be in a world of hurt. There's got to be a whole bunch of people that didn't get paid what they were thinking they were getting paid, or going to get paid, because you only pay out commissions on a certain thing based on how they have it. So it's just sad watching this happen. Now, so why doesn't he just throw in the towel? He probably isn't a quitter, number one. So he's probably trying to figure out, because he's got a cause. I mean, right or wrong, delusional or not, he's got a cause. He's got a point to make. This is his baby. then also he's probably going to try to turn this thing around so he doesn't get actually found to be a pyramid, because if he's found to be a pyramid and then you go from, the FTC to the Department of Justice, there could be potentially even some jail time if those charges are brought up against him and maybe even some of the people that were running the company as well. So he's in a really, really, really tough spot. So my prognosis is he's going to – go ahead, Scott.
No, I was going to say the judge has already stated that there's a really good chance that this is an illegal pyramid. He's already shown his hand on that. And the FTC, just to go back to that document you mentioned, they claim that BK selling off these assets, which is in his canning company. I think he has two companies. I'm not sure exactly what the relationship is there, but yeah, he was trying to raise some money, probably for his attorneys, that the FTC said first of all, they said, we believe this is against your orders, Judge, but if it is not against your orders, we want you to change your orders so it is against your orders, because the whole thing that we're trying to do is conserve as much of this value as we can, so that in the likely scenario, which the judge has already said is very likely, that this thing is an illegal pyramid, we want to return the maximum money back to the distributors that we can. And that's the whole idea that the FTC is doing, is trying to preserve capital for what they hope is the eventual return of that money as much as they can. I'm sure it's going to be some small fraction of what was put into the thing, but to try to return as much as they can back. And that's really the whole idea, as far as why the FTC is doing what they're doing.
Right. And now it's also getting more complex because the IRS is investigating, I think, their 2012 and 2013 corporate tax returns. So, it just doesn't get any better. He's in a negative spiral. And if it were a bar fight, by now somebody should step in and say, come on, stop beating this guy up and let him go. I mean, he's not going to be good for anything at this point anymore. He probably learned his lesson. So
I hadn't heard the IRS. That is really big.
Yeah.
That's really big.
Yeah, I mean, you just say, how much can one man actually take? So then you also get into the whole concept of, and this is where I differ from maybe the way the justice system works, is because, at this point, I don't know what you do with the guy, but now you have to be destroying other people's lives as well. You're affecting his family, his kids, a whole bunch of other people that are now also what I call victims. And I don't make the laws and I don't do the justice system, but common sense would also say, when is enough enough? Like, when is enough enough? And really are the people that are going to pay the penalty for this really those that really need to pay the penalty for this? Because this is going to really hurt a whole bunch of probably really nice people, like families, kids, employees, a whole bunch of other things as well. So, when do you make your point, justice system? As a case in point here, I just want to, and this is totally unrelated. As far as like when you really don't know all the details, there's the CEO of the drug company, the world's most villainous, if you will, hated CEO, the one who took the drug, he bought a company, the drug was selling for like, I don't know, it was $13.50 a pill, and he jumped up the price to $1,700 a pill, $75,000 for a batch of these things. And you look at him as a CEO and you say, what a villain, or you could say the nasty names of all these types of people. Well, what you're reading in the press is one thing. And then when you actually get a chance to listen to the people, when you find out the real story, maybe what they were doing, either they're pathological liars or they were telling the truth and you're not sure. But there was a website that I just went to recently. And I don't know who this gentleman is. The first time I ever went there, his name is Ethan Vanderbilt. And I don't know if you know who he is, Scott. But it was Ethan.
I read his website for some time. Yep.
Yeah, and he had a little YouTube video about this that led to another YouTube video about this. And for all those people that sometimes really need a great example of there might be another side of the story, find the one where he was interviewed by a guy named Josh. I think it's Josh Robbins, and his shtick name is I'm Still Josh. And I think from what I read, Josh has AIDS. Or is HIV positive, and was interviewing this gentleman, this what's his Scorelli, I think is the CEO's name of the company where he bought, who was, by the way,
something like
just arrested. He was just arrested for unrelated charges relative to his previous company, but he's being vilified for being such a horrible guy. Now, I'm not standing up for the gentleman. All I do know is that when I watched that video from I'm Still Josh that I found from that one website, so you could probably find it if you do a YouTube search for it. When you really do listen to the gentleman, you'll see that there's another side of the story probably for sure. So I'll give BK Barreco the same other side of the story thing. Maybe there's another part of him that, really, everybody says he's a real nice guy, hard worker, good family man, all those types of things. But it's just tragedy when these things happen. Now, why did they happen? Why did he put himself in this position? It was real simple. You got to sell your product to people that aren't a part of your deal. So all you network marketers out there, all the things we always say, if you are selling your product to people that aren't part of your deal and you're still building the sales organization and they're selling their product to people that aren't part of the deal, that is your get out of trouble card. I mean, you don't have any problems at all. If you're selling stuff to people that aren't part of the compensation plan, you're scot-free. You could have the biggest, best company help as many people as you want. It's the internal consumption through the product-based pyramid, which is really what happened with Vemma, what might happen with Herbalife, what did happen with Banner's Broker, what may happen to more companies. And it just seems as if, for whatever reason, I think the SEC and the FTC, probably more the SEC as well, they've gone after all the bankers already from whatever happened in the banking industry. And now they're really just tuning up their attention to the smaller entrepreneurs because they can. They just went after a company called Team Vin, V-I-N-H, which happens to be the first name of the gentleman that runs the company. And you can find that article on, which one was it? I think it was patrickpretty.com. On patrickpretty.com, look for Team Vin. And when you read the complaint, you'll see that the government has a pretty good handle on what's an MLM versus what's a pyramid. And they also went after Team Vin for the claims that we'll do all the work for you. Because as soon as you start claiming we'll do all the work for you, you just turned your little MLM to being something, well, we want to help the little guy, we want to do all the work for you, into an investment contract. And that's the fourth prong of the Howey test. H-O-W-E-Y, if you want to go look for that as far as the four prongs of the Howey test. But they're going after Team Vin, and by comparison, Team Vin is a little player. He was a $3 million thing. Now, not that $3 million is a little bit of money, because if it showed up on your doorstep, you'd probably have a different day. But $3 million for a company to be shut down by the SEC is really showing how low the bar is becoming. So
yeah, I think that's real key.
That as well.
That's a really good point, Peter, because when you do change from an MLM to a security, then you're really changing from the FTC to the SEC, and I think that's where in the securities business things are much better defined, and therefore it's easier for the SEC to go after people than it is for the FTC, because the FTC is still kind of murky. They've got some court precedent, but in general, really what they have is the Section 5 rules in the FTC, which says you can't do anything that's unfair or deceptive. Well, that's such a generic rule. What the FTC complains about now is because it is so general and generic, we have to do intensive fact-finding to figure out if this really is unfair and or deceptive. And so, the FTC's complaint is we don't have the resources to look into everybody, which is unfortunate because, like we talked about last week, I think, the analogy that I like to come up with is that's like taking a little pea shooter out into a field of locusts, and every time you shoot it, you kill a locust, but there's a million other locusts there, and that's how the MLMs are. Is you take one down, by the time it took you to take one down, 10 more were born, and 10 others collapsed on their own. And when I say collapsed, I mean they ripped people off, but then they failed. And so you have all that trail of damage that's being left. And just to comment on these other people that are being affected besides BK, the intent of the law, one of the intents is to provide a message to others that are doing that or thinking about doing that, and to dissuade them from doing similar things. That BK really should have thought that through before he got into trouble, the fact that he could really cause a lot of damage in other people's lives, even honest people. All of his employees who probably had no clue, what an MLM is and how it's supposed to work. And when you have the head of the DSA out there saying, and this is recently, within the last couple of months, saying, and DSA is Direct Selling Association, which is the lobbying group of the MLMs essentially. But he was saying within the last couple of months, oh no, you don't need to have any retail sales. And this was after the Vemma judge said, you can't get a commission, Mr. Distributor, unless you have at least 51% of product sales to external customers. And so it's almost like a bizarro world out there right now, as far as what's the requirements, what is the roadmap of a legal versus an illegal. But you nailed it. If you're making plenty of customer sales, and I would define plenty as at least half of your sales are customers versus internal consumption, then you're probably not going to get attention from the FTC. And of course, that assumes you don't have a tool scam. I have to make sure I cover that. But yeah, if you've got lots of retail sales, and I think that the 50% bar is very low, but it's low, but it would put most MLMs out of business, is my opinion, especially if you're talking about non-party plan MLMs. Almost all of them would go out of business if that was the requirement. They just could not survive. And so, yeah, that whole idea of trying to keep people from cheating by punishing the ones that are caught is a deterrent. But if you only shut down one or two a year, and there's hundreds out there, then all those hundreds are thinking, well, gee, what are my chances of getting caught? Right now they're pretty low, and that's a problem. We just don't have the enforcement, and therefore people get away with what they think they can get away with.
That's exactly right. Scott, I'm going to let you just take the next 2 seconds. So take the next 2 minutes. I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I just wanted to, reiterate that even though I've put a lot of emphasis on the tool scam, I have come up with what I consider and what I refer to as the magic ingredient or the formula that makes an MLM legitimate, and that is to have plenty of retail sales so that you're making most of your, at least the majority of the profit from sales to external customers, not to your downline distributors. And that includes anything from profits from tools to the sign-up fee to the renewal fee, all of those things that you pay for. If the retail sales are not producing the majority of profits, then you're probably an illegal pyramid. And hopefully, as there's more definition around these things, we can clean out the bad players so that people don't get taken advantage of, because both Peter and I believe MLM is a great business model, but it has to be done right. And unfortunately, my view is most, especially non-party plan MLMs, are not doing it right. And so we do need some definition around this so that we can't just go on with having one or two companies a year being taken out and the rest of them just operating scot-free. It just isn't the right thing. It's just causing so much financial and time damage to people. It just has to be stopped so that we can have a legitimate industry.
Yep. And Scott, I was sorry for the interruption. I'm always amazed on the level of lack of knowledge. Well, I'm not amazed. This is the stuff that you and I study all the time, so we're kind of into it. We're in tune to some of the things that happen. If I wasn't part of this industry at the level that we are, I wouldn't know a lot of these things. So we just have to kind of bring them to the attention of the casual listener that might be listening in, trying to figure this stuff out. I was just listening to a conference call. One of our customers asked me to, hey, check this out. This is really great. We're going to get rich. So he sent me tell me about this, send me a video. So, of course, there was very little knowledge about the product. They said all you really need to know about the product. That was great. And the rest of the conference call was on compensation plan. But the compensation plan went a little bit like this. It's a $20 one-time out-of-your-pocket payment, and it's going to be a forced matrix, and everybody's going to be, stacked left to right, up and down, all that type of thing. And you're not going to have to worry about selling anything, even if you just took a spot, because everybody's going to be coming under you. You're going to be making some money. And I just said to myself, and then you're still going to have to pay, they said, but your payments aren't going to come out of your pocket anymore. It's going to come out of your e-wallet that you put your money into. So the $20 deduction for the product every single month wasn't going to really come out of your credit card. It was going to come out of the e-wallet, because we're going to make you so much money because there's going to be so much spill. And that's a typical product-based pyramid scam. There's just, if you're not selling the product to an outsider, if it's just all internal consumption, and there's not building a sales force, and you're not selling anything, then you're in a pyramid. So I know that the sad part about it was, Scott, when I was listening to the recording, one of the girls had to interrupt the moderator by saying, we filled up the lines. Now people can't get in. So they flood their way to these types of things, because it almost sounds as if, well, you just put in $20 one time, all of us are going to be rich, and then somebody's got a calculator with a multiplication button, so they just keep pushing multiply. You have this many on this level, this many on this level, this many on this level. Pretty soon you're going to have $3 million coming in when you fill up your fifth level on your 87th, quadrant. And all of those types of things. If you want to know what one sounds like, just listen to one of those calls, and it's probably a product-based pyramid scheme, or just a money game in general. So just for some of the newer people that are listening in, how do you determine it? Use a little bit of brains and common sense. And if they're not promoting sales of product to people that aren't part of the compensation plan, chances are you should probably run away.
Yeah, keep in mind that most people that I've ever approached have never heard of MLM or Amway. They're totally uneducated on this. And just the fact that phone line was filling up illustrates that fact, because if people were aware of this, there's no way they could fill up that phone line. But apparently they were able to do it fairly easily and very quickly. And so there's a lot of people out there, and I'll use the word ignorant, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean they just don't know. And when there's all this excitement and emotion, and especially when there's people that are already making money at it, it just draws people in, and they're good people. In fact, most people in MLM are good people, but they just don't know that you have to have these retail sales. They don't understand their upline is making most of their profits, not from retail sales, but from the tools that they're buying. In your case, your illustration here, the e-wallet is kind of like a tool that they use it to, move money from one pocket to another, and then pretend that it's free. But if you step back from it just a little bit, you go, well, wait a second, that's the same thing as me taking out of my wallet. But they get over that with all the emotion and the hype and everyone. And there's a lot of group dynamics here too. When you're in a group of people that are excited, it's really easy to get caught up and sort of suspend your judgment. And as soon as the checks start flowing, then it's even easier to suspend your judgment. So these people are very clever. It's an evil clever, but it's still very clever. And I think our job of education is one of the more important ones, and that's why I'm so thankful for you having me on these radio programs once a week, just to get the word out. In fact, I was approached by a guy via email last week who asked me some questions about MLMs after listening to us on the radio, and I gave out my email address, which, by the way, is stoptheamwaytoolscam@yahoo.com. It's the same as my website, stoptheamwaytoolscam@yahoo.com. And feel free to ask me any question you have, because I'll be honest. I won't exaggerate. I won't tell you anything I don't know about. If I don't know, I'll say, I don't know. Here's some things to look for, but I don't know the answer to your question. And hopefully we can have more of that happening.
Excellent. Okay, good. So on that note, I want to say thanks for everybody listening in. This will be the last radio show we do before Christmas. So if anybody celebrates Christmas that's listening, Merry Christmas. We'll be on the other side as well. And Scott, I guess we'll be here the days after Christmas as well. But for those people that are celebrating Christmas, Merry Christmas. And we will catch you next time. Thanks for being here. And thanks, Scott, for everything you do. Catch you next time.
Thank you, Peter.
You've been listening to Building Fortunes Radio on buildingfortunesradio.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to check us out every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time for the designated Building Fortunes Radio segment with Peter Mingils. Be sure to check out the buildingfortunesradio.com website for our featured segments. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world.